So much for hopping on, and thank you for taking the assessment. I saw those coming in over the last couple of weeks, so I'm very excited to be here today. We have two things that we're going to do in our program or in our time together today. The first one is I'm just going to do a very brief introduction of myself and Janik, a little bit about what you can expect when we're on site, but then I do want to dive in and make sure that we have enough time to cover the DISC assessment. And how that is going to work is I'm going to go through and really just walk through how to properly read the assessment. We're going to do some activities around the assessment and then ensure that everybody has all of their questions answered. So, as Laura said, we've got a lot that we're going to cover here, but it's usually really fun. Everybody loves to hear about themselves, right? And how awesome we all are. So, that's what our assessment does. So, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to share my screen and I'll be sharing and unsharing, like I said, as we go through. To Laura's point, I do appreciate everybody being on mute, but if you have any questions as we're going through, we have a couple of options. You can unmute or you can put it in the chat as well. I'll be doing my best to monitor. And again, I'll stop and we'll be answering some questions too after I go through a bit of the assessment. All right, so how do we feel about that? We're good, ready to go? Excellent. Perfect. So, as Laura mentioned, are you able to see? Perfect. You're able to see my screen. Okay, right? It says, all right, perfect.
You're good.
So, as Laura mentioned, my name is Tara Stewart, and I am a senior sales facilitator at Janik Performance Group. And just to give you a little bit of my background, I've been doing sales training, sales leadership training for the past, and actually in sales for just under 35 years. So I'm really excited to be here. This is something that I'm very passionate about, being able to work with groups such as yourselves, to be able to look at how can we enhance our skills out in the field. So the program that we are going to go through when we meet on site is designed by Janik Performance Group. And I just wanted to give you a little bit about who we are and what we do. So we are what we call a research-based sales performance company. So the first time that I heard that, I kind of did a little bit like, what does that really mean, right? Like sounds a little bit markety. But here's what I want to let you know. When we are in class and we go through the critical selling skills program, the one thing that is very important to us here at Janik Performance Group is that everything that we're going to teach you is based and backed by research. So we're going to go through a framework of core skills that are easily adaptable, easily, able to be put into practice in the field and are highly effective at having conversations with your retailers. So all the stuff, the skills and best practices that we're going to talk about when we go through class, they're all backed by research. And as you can see, we do work with a lot of different clients. We've won quite a bit of awards for our program. That really doesn't matter as much to you. But what I really wanted you to know is that everything we're going to talk about when we're in class, it really does work. And that's my key thing. If we start putting it into practice, it does work. So what will we be looking at? So what we're going to do is in class, we're going to be going through our critical selling skills model framework. So in a nutshell, what we're going to talk about is we're going to look at a framework of skills and best practices that allow us to have more in-depth relationship building conversations. Excuse me, my throat's dry for a sec. With our retailers. So we're going to cover a variety of topics. We're going to kick things off talking about like trust and why building trust with the retailers is so important in our role. Really, it is kind of the crux of the success that we have is how much trust we can build with the retailers that we work with. We will then kick off talking about planning, how we want to ensure that we're coming in, we're prepared, we're ready to go. We know what we're there to talk about. We have an objective, and that really helps us once we start engaging in the conversations. So we will move from there into what we call our opening module. So our opening module, and again, don't worry, I'm giving you very high level. We're going to go into this in more detail when I'm on site. But the opening module is really about how do we set the tone and really take ownership of the conversation. So we're going to talk about things like how do we properly open the call? How do we, the creating connections, that's actually going to be tied into what we're doing today. How do we learn to identify and adapt to other people's behavior styles, even if we don't know what they are, just by observation? We're going to talk about how do we properly start a conversation by delivering what we call legitimate purpose statement to just take ownership and let the client know what we're there to talk about. And we're then going to confirm gaining their buy-in before we move to the next section. So if we've planned, it allows us to be able to have a solid, strong opening, which then opens the door for discovering. So we're going to move from opening to discovering, where we're really going to focus on our questioning and our listening skills. How can we properly use questioning and listening skills to gather information? So then we're able to decide, okay, what's going to be the next step? What's going to be our next recommended, meeting, whatever that looks like. So we're going to talk about how if we understand our clients through good discovery, then we know where to take the conversation from there. We will also talk about closing as well. So how do we ask for that next step or, recommendation that we have? How do we then make it actionable by defining, what the next steps are, where we're going to go? And then we have objection handling that we will focus on as well. What happens when we get questions or concerns from our retailers? How do we handle those in a way that allows us to build trust and credibility with our retailers, instead of halting the conversation or, slowing down the relationship building? So this is going to be the model that we are going to be focused on. The benefits of the model is being able to really be able to increase our performance. We have a very fast-paced competitive marketplace that we work in. So how do we not only increase our performance, but better understand our retailers, still be able to build that stronger trust-based relationship authentically and quickly? How do we engage with them as trusted advisors? We need to be able to think outside of the box and find ways that we can bring value to the experience. And then at the end of the day, how can we win more business, reduce retailer objections, gain retailer loyalty, and all of that will be through using our model, our framework that we'll talk about. And just to give you just one last thing, our agenda, or sorry, there's two last things, I apologize. Our agenda will go through all of those modules that I just mentioned to you in a 1.5 day period, as well as we will be adding a skills application portion to the end of that. And each of the modules, we'll be visiting these key areas. We'll look at what is the main strategy or big picture in that module, what are skills that we can perfect in that module, what are best practices we can layer in, also that we can get performance outcomes that we can expect. So in a nutshell, I'm going to just stop sharing for one moment here. That is everything that we will be covering when I am on site. And just to give you a little bit of a heads up as well, please be prepared. It is very fast paced, so we're going to be moving and shaking, but it is also very interactive. All right. So we're going to be doing breakouts and discussions and activities. So just know that it is a really good time, but yeah, we get a lot done in our 1.5 days. So I want to take a pause. Does anybody have any questions about what's coming up? Anything they want to know what to expect when we're in class? Anything at all? Please feel free to unmute or throw it in the chat, whatever you prefer. How do we feel? We're good? All right. Lewis? Is it Lewis or Louis? It's Lewis, right?
Luis, actually. Yep.
Luis.
Yep.
Luis. Okay. Thank you for that. Luis,
No
I was
problem.
just going to say thank you for the thumbs up. I saw that. All right. So if there are any questions that come up, please throw them in the chat or interrupt me. But what we're going to do now is I do want to move into the disc portion. We're going to spend tons of time on the overview, the framework once we meet in class. But I am very excited to bring you the disc overview. So first of all, just a quick show of hands. How many of you were able to complete the assessment before joining us here today? Is everyone able to do it?
Everyone
Okay.
has completed it, Tara,
Oh,
and we have all of
excellent.
their copies. Yeah, so everyone's completed it, should
Good.
have theirs, and then we instructed them kind of your squiggly lines for write what they didn't agree with and the
Oh,
fun
did you?
time.
Okay,
Yes,
good,
so
good.
they should be prepared for that.
Okay, excellent. So not only did they complete it, but they did the pre-work for it. I love it. All right. So what we're going to do then in this next portion is what I want to do is I really want to be able to go through and walk you through how to read the assessment. And the reason why this is so important is because if we do an assessment like this and then we just look at the results, if we don't quite understand how it is measuring things or what it's looking for, then we can have some confusion. And then sometimes that will make it so that I just want to make sure that you really understand how the report is read so that you have the full understanding of what it says. So the first thing I want to talk about when we get into the disc, and I'm going to bring up a slide for this in a moment, is I do want to make sure that everybody understands as well that this is like not a personality test. This is a behavioral or communication assessment. And while it will give us generalized statements and kind of talk about our preferences in these areas, please note that this does not mean that we are always the 100% this way. We are emotional creatures. We're human. We may have preferences, but there may be different times when we act in slightly different ways. But overall, what this does is it gives us an idea of how it is that we prefer our observable behaviors and how we prefer to communicate. And the reason why it's so important is because in your role working with the retailers, communication is probably the biggest part of your job, right? Having the conversations, listening, being able to make recommendations. It's all based on that foundation of communication. So being able to have an assessment like what we have here is very important because it gives us an understanding of ourselves and how it is that we do communicate. So what are we going to cover in the disc portion part of this? So the first thing we're going to look at is we are going to go through and review DISC, and I'm going to review the actual assessment and walk through, give you a little bit more color, a little bit more context to it. From there, what we're going to do is we're then going to look at how do we look at identifying other customer styles. So it's good that we know our own, but then we want to look at how can we identify retailers that we are working with? How do we identify their particular style? And then finally, how do we work at increasing our success? So when we know our style, we can recognize our retailer style. How do we utilize that to be able to increase our success in the field? And the one thing I wanted to highlight about the increased success portion is that when we are in class in the beginning, in August, we will layer in a lot of your assessment throughout that day and a half. We'll talk about how do we adjust our legitimate purpose statement? How do we maybe structure our questions? How do we present or handle objections based on who it is that we are working with and what their style is? So we've got a lot that we're going to cover here. So we'll go ahead and we'll dive in, and we're going to start off with our reviewing our disc. So the first thing I wanted to do is I wanted to start out by talking about what DISC is and what it isn't. So DISC is a neutral language. So the first thing is that there are no right or wrong styles, all right? Whenever I do this, people say, "Oh, what's the best style for that? What's the best style here?" The best style is your style because that's you, all right? And we are all a unique combination of these four areas. No style is better than another style. While we may have strengths and areas where we are stronger, areas where we may have more room for opportunity, there is no better style. And all styles can be successful. They can be successful in working with retailers. They can be successful leaders. They can be successful teammates. It's really about having an understanding of your style, knowing how it's impacting the people around you, and being able to utilize it. That's the most important part. So when we look at all the different styles, again, every style has strengths that can be leveraged for sure. We all come with our areas of strength, but every style, if we are overextended, does have potential limitations or potential behaviors that can be frustrating to others. I always like to say that we're amazing exactly the way that we are, but somewhere in the world, we're annoying someone by being who we are because there are opposite styles. So this is just a little bit of information about what DISC is. Like I said, not a personality, but behavioral or communication preferences. And the final thing is that I want to say is that all styles, regardless of where we are, we can adapt to be more effective at working with our retailers, working internally with our peers, working with our leaders. So being aware is the first step in order to be able to adapt to be more effective. All right, so we are going to kick things off. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to move to our Styles Insights graph. So hold on here. Sorry, I'm going to stop sharing for one moment. I just want to grab what page that this is on. I think it should be right up in the beginning, just so everybody has it. Sorry, and I apologize. My PowerPoint doesn't have the page numbers, but I want to make sure that I just get the right pages here. Hold on. And I had this, of course, all ready to go, Laura. And then, of course, the minute I need it. uh, so we should
Always.
be on about page 4 for everyone. If you're able to see page 4, that's what we're going to be looking at. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the actual graph. Okay. Oh, actually, hold on. Stop. I think I shared the wrong thing. My goodness. Hold on here. All right, are you able to see my PowerPoint again? Everything's good? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. So the first thing I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about on page number 4, the graphs and how things are measured. So when we look at the DISC assessment, what you will see is there's 4 areas that you are measured on. And I'm going to walk you through each of these areas, but as a quick overview, we look at how a person approaches problems and challenges, how they influence people, so how they approach people in contacts, how they respond to the pace of their environment, as well as how do they approach compliance situations. Now, I want to highlight right off the bat the reason why there are 2 graphs. Okay, and if you have your disc assessment printed out, what I would like you to do is grab your pen, and I'm going to give you some instructions. If you don't have it, you don't have to worry about it. You can just think about it. But on the adapted style, the one that says graph number 1, what I want you to do is take your pen, and at the top of that, I want you to write me at work. Okay, what that particular graph stands for is that is a graph that measures where you are when you are doing something, you're either with certain people or being asked to do certain things. Think of that as how do we adapt when we show up in certain situations. So, for example, Hunter, we're going to say, you know what, you have to meet the new in-laws for the first time. You may show up a little bit different than normally for that first meeting. Or Tate, maybe you're starting a new job. You might adjust yourself a little bit for that new job. So the adapted style is how do we adjust ourselves when we are in a certain situation with certain people or doing certain things. The second graph, the one that says natural, that I want you to write above there, the real me. Okay. So the second graph, graph number 2, is how we behave when we are at our most comfortable. So when we're, with our friends and family, people that we love, just when we are feeling the most comfortable to be ourselves. And the second thing I want to talk about is why do we have 2 graphs? All right. So when we look at the 2 graphs, the first one, well, actually, let me just ask a quick question. So quick show of hands, how many of you, when you look at your graph number 1 and your graph number 2, they look very similar to each other, right? Okay, so they like almost mirror with just some slight adjustments. Okay, so here's what we're looking for when we do the 2 graphs, okay? Most times we have a style on how, like I said, how we are when we're being ourselves. And we do adjust ourselves in certain situations. However, what we want to be careful of is we want to make sure that we're not doing what we call major adaptations in our adjusting style. And the reason for this is because when we look at the 2 graphs, if there is too big of a difference in one of the 4 areas, then what happens is it can be unsustainable long term. So let me give you a little bit more detail on what that looks like. In my example here that I have up on the screen, you're going to see the yellow bar, all right? So the yellow bar on the natural side is scored at an 82, but on the adapted style, it is a 62. So what that tells us is that it is a 20-point spread between a person's natural style and how they are acting in certain situations. And the reason why this is important is because if there is a gap of 20 points or greater, And typically, if it kind of crosses that midline where you can see that dark line going through, that is something that we want to be aware of because oftentimes it's not sustainable over a long-term period. So I'll give you an example. My blue score, and we'll get to this in a moment here, but my blue score personally is very low. It's like a 6. It's almost minuscule. Okay. If my adapted style had me at a 65, I'm going to tell you right now that I probably am not going to be able to sustain that much attention to detail for that long. So it would be an area, a possible area of stress. So what I want to do is I want everybody to just take a moment and I want you to compare your numbers. Okay. So if you look at your red number on each side, is there a difference of 20 points or greater? Your yellow to yellow, green to green, and blue to blue. So, and all we're looking for is 20 points or higher, and it crosses that middle line. So does anybody have any that they want to ask about? They're good? Okay. The closer your adapted style is to your natural style, all that means is just the more comfortable you feel being yourself in that particular environment. But again, we all adjust ourselves, right? So there's nothing wrong with the adjustment. We just want to make sure we're not adjusting too far. All right. So if anybody does have any questions, again, you can throw them in the chat or keep them towards the end. But the first thing, like I said, is I wanted to explain the difference between the two graphs. What we're going to do next is we're going to focus on graph number 2. All right. And graph number 2, like I said, is our natural style. So that's the one that at the core is who we are. Typically, our natural style is formed at a younger age. And as we grow, it really doesn't change that much over time. I've done several assessments where you'll have somebody who did one, maybe 10, 15, 20 years earlier. And while they might have adjusted a little bit, for the most part, our general pattern stays the same. So we're going to talk about the 4 scores, or sorry, the 4 colors and what it is that they mean. So we'll start with the first one, which is the red. And the red is how a person approaches problems and challenges. So the first thing I want to highlight when we go through this, all right, is everything is scored from 0 to 100. And I want to make sure that you know that 0 is not bad and 100 is not good. All right. I want you to think about the 0 to 100 as more how observable is it in a person. And I am going to give you a few more descriptors so that you can kind of get an idea when we go through this. So if you look on my particular chart here, you will see that there is a 92 red score on this particular example. So the red score, again, like I said, approaches how do we approach a problem or a challenge when it comes across our desk. So if somebody scores 75 or higher, what that is it's a very aggressive approach to problems and challenges. Okay. And by aggressive, I don't mean that you're fighting somebody in the parking lot after work or anything like that. All right. What I mean by that is if you have a problem or a challenge, you really do just want to jump on it. Okay. You want to make sure you deal with it right away. You don't like having things sitting on your desk. In fact, it will bug you. So something will happen. You'll be like, oh, I have to deal with this right away. So problems and challenges, it's a very aggressive approach. Now, just down from that, if somebody scores 50 to 75, that is what we call an assertive approach. All right. So what that means is we still will have an instinct to want to solve or fix the problem or challenge right away, but we may take a little bit of a beat. We may take a step back. We might think about it a little bit more. So imagine that the aggressive is like, okay, we're just going to jump in and solve this. The assertive is like, okay, let me think on this for a quick second, but we're still going to be on that proactive side of getting it off of our plates right away. And then we start to go under that. It's called our energy line. So 50 is what we call the energy line. So when we start to drop below that, the next category down is 25 to 50. So if anybody scores 25 to 50, all right, on the red, it means that they take a more diplomatic approach, meaning before they jump right in and start to take action, they like to sit back, they like to ask questions, they like to ask the people around them, maybe start to gather some information. So that would be a diplomatic approach. And then the final one at the bottom is what we call a reflective approach. Okay. And we used to call it passive. People didn't like that word. So think about that as before you want to solve a problem, all right? You really want to think it through. You do not like to jump into solutions too fast. You like to be able to think through all the scenarios, make sure you've understood it all, and then you will get through to the problem solving. The reason why passive used to be used, though, is because if you are really low on the red score, all right, there is a tendency to be a little bit more like, hey, you know what? If I just put this over here for a few days, it might just sort itself out. Right? So that can be a little bit of an approach that a low red will take. So if we look through this, all right, I'm going to highlight how 0 is not bad and 100 isn't good. While people who score on the higher part, they do tend to like to jump in and get things done. Sometimes if you're too high, you do things without thinking them through thoroughly, right? So sometimes it can lead to a little bit more impulsivity or just jumping in before you've thought it through. So it can be a strength because you can make decisions and get things done, but you also have to be careful not to be making too quick of decisions, not thinking things through. And then on the bottom side of the scale, you do the strength is that you think things through. You just want to be sure that you're not putting it too far off where you don't deal with the problem. So again, we all fit at some scale in between, anywhere from reflective up to aggressive. So I'm going to take a moment and in the chat, I want you to write for your red score, the personal score that you got. Does that feel reflective of how you handle problems and challenges? So, and you can give me a thumbs up or you can write yes in the chat or use your react button, whatever works for you. But does that sound about accurate for your red score? Good? Okay, perfect. All right, excellent. So the next thing we're going to move then to is our yellow score. And our yellow score is basically how do we use or influence the people around us, right? So how do we kind of react and respond to the people in our world? So again, 0 to 100, 100 not necessarily good, 0 not bad. So if we look at the yellow, if someone scores in the 75 or above, this means that how you approach people in contacts is in a very outgoing fashion. All right. So I want you to think of a high yellow, again, that's 75 and higher, as somebody who has no problem starting conversations. They come across as very outgoing. Oftentimes they come in a room and they're excited to meet people and talk to people and get to know people. They tend to be the word that I like to use is they tend to be very outgoing, right? They have a very outgoing approach when they meet people. Now, if you go down to the moderate to high, which again is our 50 to 75, this is what I call a very friendly approach. All right. So, friendly meaning, yeah, you want to get to know people, you're friendly, you talk to them, but maybe your energy is just a little bit down, right? Maybe you're not like, hey, welcome to the party. You're just a little bit more subdued, but you're still on the friendly side. So, still kind of making that effort to connect with people. Now, if we go below the energy line, the word that I like to use for anybody who scores between 25 and 50 is poised. All right. So, what I mean by that is when you meet somebody, you might be a little bit more poised. You might hold back a little bit. Again, not saying not friendly, but poised or just slightly a little bit. You might talk a little bit less. You might let people approach you a little bit more. And if we score 0 to 25, that is what I call a reserved style. So a reserved style is one that will kind of keep to themselves until they get to know people. And here again, this is my perfect example of 100 not being good and 0, being bad. There are a lot of people who score very high in yellow and they think they're amazing with people, right? But really, they're just like outgoing little tornadoes that rip around the room and annoy people around them. Okay, so just because you're outgoing does not mean you're good with people. And subsequently, I've seen many people who are down on the reserved side who are actually really good with people. They just have to get to know them a little bit first, right? So they're not going to be the ones who are going to, be telling you everything about their lives in the first 10 minutes. They're going to hold back a little bit. But I think the reason why they're really good with people is because they're pretty good at listening and stuff like that as well. So we either have the outgoing or the reserved. So I'll just do a quick show of hands again. For the yellow score, how does everybody feel about the yellow score? Good? Your score reflects? Okay, perfect. Then we move to the green, all right? And the green is a little bit counterintuitive when we look at it. So the green is a person's response to the pace in their environment, all right? People like to move at different paces. So if we look at someone who has, again, a very high green, so 75 or above, the word, and okay, there's really no other word for me to use than this. So I know some people don't love it, but I'm going to share it anyway. Is what we call low urgency. All right. It does kind of, it is a reflective type pace as well. And what I mean by that is if you are 75 or higher, it just means that you do not like to be rushed. Okay. So if someone asks you to do something, you want to be able to take the time to think it, read it, be thorough. It's a style that does not do very well with urgent deadlines and stuff like that, just because it's important to them to be able to kind of take that time. So again, I know I said reflective for the low end on the red, but I think it also applies on the high end of the green in that it's a reflective pace. You like to think things through. So if you score high on the green 75 and above, I do call that a lower urgency. So you like to work at your own pace. Doesn't mean you're slow. You can work as fast as anyone else, but it's at your pace, whatever you deem that. If you score between 50 and 75, that's what I call you like to work at a very methodical pace. So you might pick it up a bit, but not at the risk of missing anything. So you'll be very methodical in the way that you approach things and the pace that you use. Now, again, once we drop below that energy line, that's where we move into the consistent. Okay. So consistent pace means you work at a little bit of a quicker pace, but you are still consistent. You're moving a little faster, but you're still making sure you're consistent in what you're doing. And then we have the low pace. All right. So this is our zero, or sorry, our dynamic, our very fast pace. This is our 0 to 25. It's in our lower score. Anybody who scores 0 to 25, you really, really like to work in a very dynamic environment. You like it when things are moving quickly. You like it when they're moving and shaking. You can respond very well to last minute things. In fact, if somebody like this person here on my sample assessment here, they have a 6 on green. That means if you put them in a job where they had to do the same thing every day in and day out at a very slow pace, they would probably lose their minds within about 2 weeks. So a lot of people I find, they on the dynamic side, again, they really thrive with that dynamic pace. So some of the things that you may want to be careful of, okay? If you have a high red or high yellow with a low green, you may be a lot for people, okay? Because you come in really fast and hey, let's get things done and you're outgoing and let's make decisions. And somebody who is the opposite of you is like, whoa, slow down. Let's think about this. You're moving too fast. You kind of invite that dynamic pace. So we have to be aware of that and cautious of it. And then finally, we have our blue. All right. So our blue is our how we approach compliance or rules and regulations. Think of this as rules and regulations that are put in place by someone else. Okay. So if someone is 75 or higher, this is what we call a very, I mean, there's no other word for it but perfectionist. We are very compliant. When we are asked to do something, we do it. It's done ahead of time. Everything's correct. There's probably additional details in there. I'll give you an example. If you're ever asked by your leaders or your managers to put all your information into a CRM system, right? Some sort of a CRM. The person who is 75 or above will not only have it in there, but they'll have it early and they'll have extra detail and it will be very thorough. Okay. If you score between 50 to 75, you will be very careful, meaning you will also have it in there. It will usually be in there on time. You may not go into as much detail as the score, the perfection style above you, but you will be very careful to make sure that everything is done correctly. And then we start falling below the energy line. If you scored between 25 and 50, this is what I call conscientious. Okay. So what it means is you're going to give it a good try. You're going to try to get it in there as best as you can. When you can remember, you get it in there. It may not be fully complete, but you'll do your best to put most of your notes in. You may have to get a reminder here or there from your manager, to say, hey, you haven't got your stuff in. We need this in by this date. So you will make a conscientious effort, but it won't always be 100%, right? you'll give it a try. And then the 0 to 25 is what I call a very cavalier approach. And what I mean by that, and I'm going to tell you all, I shared with you that this is my lowest style. I feel bad for my managers when I was younger in the field because I had that whole attitude of like, hey, do you want me doing paperwork or you want me selling? Because I'm out selling. So I'll do this when I get time. Okay. So it's a very cavalier, like you'll do it. It's not to say you can't do it, but it's definitely not your priority. You don't get hung up on like the details and stuff like that. Whereas the opposite, the high style of blue, is very aware of the details and everything. All right, so we're going to take a pause here. I know I took a few minutes to talk about that, but how do we feel when we look at our assessment and all four of them together? Does it feel pretty accurate overall for you? Okay, perfect. Well, there's a couple other things that I want to share before we move on. Okay, so when we look at these four styles, or sorry, the four bars, they do tend to put themselves into what we call particular styles. So we can have a high D, a high I, a high S, and a high C. So that's the next thing I'm going to show you is when we look at the combination of where your scores lie, it'll tell you where you fit into these categories. But before we go in there, I just want to share with you one thing, all right? When we look at our graphs, okay, most people, about 80% of the population, are high in two of the colors, meaning two of their colors are over the top half of the energy line and two of them are below. Now, 5% of you are what we call purists, all right? So purist means that you only have one color that goes above that 50 line, and that's it. That means you are truly a high D, high I, high S, high C, but only 5% of the population fall into that. 80% of us have too high and too low. We also, though, have about 15% of the population that are high in three of the four categories. So they'll be high in three and low in one. That's what I call my chameleon. All right. So the chameleon usually tends to be a more neutral style where they're kind of in the middle. And I want you to think about when you look at the graphs, I want you to think about it in this way. If you are closer to the top and the bottom, the further you are along the spectrum, the more observable your behaviors are. So high and low are very observable, but then people will start to go like this, okay? So what that means is if you fall in the moderate to high and moderate to low range, might be a little bit harder for people to pick out your style because it's just not as observable. You still have your preferences and the way you like to work, but it may not be quite on display as somebody who's, these styles, very high to the top and the bottom of the graph. So we've got our purists, one color above. We've got our 80% that have two above the line. And then we have our chameleons that have three above the line. And nobody here has four above the line. And you know how I know that? Because if you have four above the line, I get a special message and we have to have a special meeting. It means that you are trying to be everything to everyone, and it is not common. I think I've only had two in the 15 years I've been doing this. So here's what I want. In the chat, can you write down how many colors do you have above that midline? Just to see if we have purists, if we have the 80%. So how many colors do we have? So we've got 2, 3, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3. Oh, we have a lot of chameleons in the room. Honestly, when I look at this, two colors, super close to three. I love it, Bailey. Aiden has two. So how many threes do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so we've got a fair amount. So twos and threes are our most common. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that and how those align together. So when we look at this, okay, how our colors line, they match up to what we call our style. So let me go ahead and share my PowerPoint here again. And this is how we can start to work through our styles when we go into class and we start talking about high Ds and high Is and S's and C's. So the first one we'll talk about is what we call our high reds or our high Ds. This is the person that has a red as their highest out of all of the numbers. And the high D stands for dominant. This is what we call a dominant behavioral style. So this particular style, like I said, is very active or very dynamic, and they are also very task focused or results. I actually kind of like using the word results instead of task focused. So think about a high D as a behavior style that is very direct, very decisive. They get things done. They are the type of style who are like, be brief, be bright, be gone. right? I don't want to hear stories about your vacation and your dog and what you did last week. I want to get to business. I want to talk about what we're here to talk about. And once we get that done, then I'm going to be happy. So, this is a style that, while can be a little bit intimidating on the surface, because again, they are very direct, they are also very loyal. This is actually one of my favorite styles because if you are able to earn their trust by showing and proving yourself to them, mainly by showing them that you're not wasting their time, then they're very loyal. They will stay with you for a long time. Now, their biggest thing that they bring to the table is that they are decisive. They do get those things done. But like I said, every potential style, if they're overstressed, can have a things that they have to be aware of. So if we look at the high Ds, if they are not careful, they can sometimes come across as very domineering or demanding. If they are in an emotional state, okay, because their biggest fear is being taken advantage of, they can come across even maybe a little bit belligerent. So while they're very good at getting things done, they have to be careful not to kind of cross that line. Now, from there, we move over to our high Is. These are influencers. Okay, so this is our influential style. So, this again is a very dynamic pace, but very relationship oriented and people focused. This group tends to be very inspirational, very interactive, interesting. They have a lot of hand gestures. They tend to be a little dramatic. You could probably figure out what I am right from this. But they're high energy, but very focused on people. Their biggest thing is they love connecting with people. That is the main driver. So while a high D, their biggest thing is getting results, a high I, their biggest thing is connecting with people. And they're very outgoing and they're very friendly. However, there's a couple things that can happen, okay? If they have too much high energy or they get going too fast, they can be a little bit impulsive and they honestly can be a little bit irritating to other styles, okay? I got told one time that my enthusiasm seemed fake. And I'm like, no, I really do just get very excited when I'm with a group that is also excited. So their biggest thing, like I said, is connecting. They do not, the one thing they don't do well with those, they don't like conflict because they are, more in that relationship style. And this is also a particular style where they can handle a lot, right? They've got that dynamic pace, they can move and shake. But at a certain point, all right, if things become too much, I imagine in my head it's like a little pressure cooker. All right. So it's building and it's building and it's building. And then all of a sudden it just kind of goes poof, right? It just blows up. Maybe they're crying, maybe they're yelling, who knows what they're doing, but they can handle a lot until they can't. And then it can be a pretty quick turn. So they have to be very careful of that as well, not overstressing themselves and taking too much on because that stress can lead to an expressive incident, if you will. And then we move to our S's. These are our high steadiness. So if green is your highest, this is what we call a very steady and stabilizing behavioral style. They are very reflective and relationship oriented. I think of this group, they're steady, stable, supportive, very sincere. Their number one driving motivator is that they are all about harmony. They want everybody to get along. They want to hear everybody's opinions. They definitely, are a style that relates really well to most people. Their biggest thing, like I said, is harmony. The one thing, though, that they can struggle with a little bit is they do have a little bit of a hard time with change. They really like known people and known processes and routine and doing things the same. So if change comes along, then they can tend to slow down. And out of all of the groups, they will be the most sensitive only because the relationships are so important to them. So imagine that you have a high S. I'm a high S, relationships are my whole thing. And I meet with a client and they're that very direct, dominant, to the point. You can tend to get your feelings hurt a little bit or take it a little bit more personally if someone isn't giving you kind of the relationship side of things. But very warm, very friendly, all about the harmony. And then we move to our high Cs. All right. So our high Cs are a very compliant style. So they're very methodical and very results oriented. They are very cautious style. They're very careful, very conscientious. They want to make sure their number one driver for a high C is that they want accuracy. They want everything to be correct. And their biggest fear is actually making a mistake. So sometimes if a mistake is made, one of their downsides can be a little bit condescending, or they can have a tendency to kind of blame the people around them versus looking at themselves. And that is only because making a mistake is, like I said, their biggest fear. They want this accuracy. And in their defense, here's what I'm going to say. All right. They are so careful with the details and so accurate that they do rarely make mistakes. But when they do, they don't like it when it happens. But it's rare. So my husband is a high C, so I can tell you that with 100% certainty. He's right about 99% of the time, but when he's wrong, he does not like to admit that he's wrong. So that's what you will see in a high C. So how we bring these together is we have what we call a dominant style. But for those of you who are high in 2 or 3, we will typically start to see some alignment. So I'll give you an example. If somebody is a high D, a high red, typically their secondary style will either be along their pace or their focus. So what I mean by that is they could be what we call a high red yellow or a high red blue. Who here has high red yellow as their combination, even if one is higher than the other? Who here has red and yellow as their two highest? Okay, so Bailey does. Okay, perfect. Who here has a red and blue? Oh, Hunter, you do as well. Good. Okay. And Cassie, good. Perfect. Who here has a high red and a high blue? Who has those as their two highest? Got anybody with that? Thought I saw a couple come through, but it might not have been in this session. Okay, so when we look at the 80% and the 2, they typically do fall along those lines. So when we're looking at a red yellow or a yellow red, the first thing I'll tell you is that person has their pace and style, so they tend to be very fast paced, but they can switch between people and results usually pretty easily. If you had somebody who had a red blue in common, what their commonality is all about results. So they can switch their pace back and forth, but they're really just a very results oriented style. If we switch to the other side, who here has a high yellow and green? And it doesn't matter which one's higher, but a yellow and green combination. Okay, so that's what I call a very relationship oriented style. So that means you are all about people and relationships. You can move your pace back and forth though, right? But you'll be very focused on relationships. And who here has a blue green as their highest? And again, doesn't matter which side goes which, but blue and green are their highest. Okay, so that's what I call, again, your commonality is the very reflective pace, but that type of style can move between people and results quite easily. But you like to take things a little bit, you just like to noodle on things a little bit more and not rush through them quite so quickly as maybe your high reds and yellows. And then, of course, we have our ones that are high in 3 out of the 4. So if you're high in 3 out of the 4, here's what I'm going to tell you. The reason why I call you a chameleon, okay? The chameleons are usually able to adapt to most people because for the majority, you can either resonate with someone's focus or their pace quite easily. So that makes you generally be, I always call it a steady Eddie style, where most people will kind of like you and really resonate with you because you have that even style there. So we've got our 1, our 2, or our 3, and that's how they all align together. So I'm going to take a pause here. Does anybody have anything unusual or anything they want to ask about their 4 styles when we look at those? How do we feel about them? Good? Yeah. Okay. I did see. Now, normally I said we'll be like a red yellow or a red blue or a yellow green or a green blue. Is there anybody here? And the only reason I ask this is because I do get it, and I know I saw it in one of my assessments, Laura, and I don't know which class we're in because I was looking them as they came in. Is there anybody here who only has 2 above the line? Okay, so not 3, but only 2, but one of them is a yellow and one of them is a blue? Or one of them is a red and one of them is a green, like opposite. Does anybody have that here? No? Okay, it's going to be in the other class that we have then in the afternoon, Laura.
Let's take a look at them
So
right
for the
now.
person
I'll
who has
see.
that, it's not very common. It's what I call, okay, so it's not the best word for it, Laura, but it's what I call it. I call it the human mullet. What I mean by that is that socially they're very outgoing and chatty, but when it comes to like detail and work, they're very like careful and conscientious. The reason why it's not very common is because it's kind of two conflicting styles, right? Fast-paced, relationship-oriented versus, reflective and results-oriented. But I did see somebody in the class, we'll have to give them that nickname, hopefully. You know what? They're a high yellow in there, so they won't be offended. But the human mullet is what I called it because they switch back and forth. The same thing goes for the red and green. I used to work with a gal in another kipney who was high red and high green. So personally, when you would be out with her, very warm, very like kind, she'd slow down, she'd really want to get to know you, but put her in a business situation and she was like, it's like she was just on, what is it, the Shark's Den or whatever. Like she was really direct and to the point. And it would be a little bit shocking because she would go back and forth between the two. So it's really a little bit more segmenting. It is very rare, but like I said, I'm gonna have to look, Laura, because I know we definitely had one in the class. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. So this is all about us and where we fit. If we are wanting to use this to our benefit, I'm going to give you three things that we're going to talk about, and then we're going to do a little activity around this. Okay. So the first thing I'll say is, and we'll talk about this when I'm in class in more detail, that we want to do what's called coming in neutral. So let's say that we're meeting people that we don't know for the first time. We've got a meeting with a new retailer. We've never met them before. We have no idea what their style is. We want to do what I call coming in neutral, which is where we want to come in the middle. All right. So if we tend to have a very fast-paced style, we want to slow ourselves down a little bit. If we tend to have a very reflective pace, we might want to bring our energy up. So where do we bring our energy? Do we bring it down a little bit or do we bring it up a little bit? And then we look at our focus. If we're very relationship oriented, we may have a tendency to be a little bit casual. So we may need to be a little bit more structured, right? Like just maybe a little bit more prepared and more structured. Or if we tend to be very results oriented, we may need to be a little bit more. I don't mean this in a bad way for anybody who's high red, but maybe a little bit more friendly. Okay. So when we're meeting people, how do we kind of come in? Not too hot, not too cold, not too casual, not too, kind of formal. How do we come in that nice neutral spot? And then the easiest way to recognize another style is to just focus on what is their pace and what is their focus, right? So Bailey, if I met you for the first time and I said, "Hey, how's it going, Bailey?" And you said, "Great, what are we here to talk about today? What's on the agenda?" You went straight to bed. That is a red, Bailey. You are a red. You did not even say, you said good, and then we moved on. But Bailey, if I said, "How's your day going?" and you're like, "Oh, it's great. Yeah, you should see." You tell me some great story about, something that happened to you on the way to work. And then you're like, "Okay, what are we here to talk about?" I'd be like, "Okay, probably yellow." The yellows, here's a big thing, okay? For anybody who's high yellow, and I can say this because I'm high yellow, high yellows do love to tell stories and talk, usually either about themselves or things that are interesting to them. So if you told me a big story and then said, "What are we here to do, Bailey?" That would be okay, Bailey's a yellow. But let's say, Bailey, I asked you how your day was, and you said, "Oh, it's good. I did this. What about you? How was your day? How was the drive? Did you get here okay?" The greens are the type of stories, or sorry, sorry, Laura, I just saw your stories come up there in the chat. The greens are the ones who will always turn it to the other person. Okay, so they'll always ask about the other person. I'm such a high yellow that oftentimes I walk away and I'm like, "Oh my goodness, I didn't even ask how they were doing or what they were saying." So that's a really good way to tell the difference between yellow and green is how much they're asking about you. And then finally, Bailey, I'm going to ask you how your day is going, okay, because we're meeting. And you're going to say, "It's great." So I had some chance to look at the notes. I've created my own agenda. Here's some questions I have. We're going to start over here with this one first. You're running the meeting for me, Bailey. You've already read it. You've researched it. You've created your questions. You're going to tell me that is definitely a high C and a high compliance. So just the way our clients respond when we say, "How is your day going?" can really tell us kind of what style they are. So think about what's their pace and what's their focus. And that's how we put these into practice. This is how we start to identify and then align. And then all we have to do is start to match that pace and that focus so that we can continue on. So we're going to do a quick activity. All right. I'm going to share my screen and in the chat, based on what we just talked about. Okay. So remember, I'll give you a review. A high D is fast-paced, results-oriented. A high yellow is fast-paced but relationship-oriented. A high S is going to be the more relaxed relationship style. and the high C is going to be the more methodical result. So I'm going to put some quotes up on the screen, all right, with some famous people. And in the chat, I want you to tell me, based on this, what style do you think they are? So the D, the I, the S, or the C. So let's go ahead. Let me do this. So the first one we have is a quote from Mr. Albert Einstein. He said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions. In the chat, what style do you think would fall under this particular? All right, we've got C, 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 C's. Yes. So here's the thing. It could be a little bit of a mixture of S's in there as well. My guess is probably a CS, but what I would say is this one would be a C for me only because they're really thinking and trying to work through the problem before they come up with that solution. So let's look at the next one. All right. We have Miss Dolly Parton. Energy begets energy. So if we look at our four styles, well, what style do you think that Miss Dolly Parton is just by that? I. Yes. Very outgoing, upbeat, relationship oriented. Now, the next one we have is Mr. Rogers. You guys are probably all way too young to know this, but anyway, we put it in there. So, mutual caring relationships require kindness and patience, tolerance, optimism, joy in others' achievements, confidence in oneself, and the ability to give without undue thoughts of gain. And yes, S S S S S S S. And the last one that we have left is Mr. Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. If something stands between you and your success, you move it. Never be denied. All right, so we have got our D's, absolutely. So obviously these were a little bit of exaggerated styles, but again, we want to think about how is it that we are coming across. So we're going to do our next activity, and then I'm going to continue going through the report, but I did want to take a moment to talk about how all the different styles like to communicate. Yes, we're good for time. Yeah, we still have a whole nother hour, don't we, Laura? I had a panic for a second where I thought maybe I was out of time. But I'm
Nope,
like, oh,
we're
this,
good.
this is the
Yeah,
I
we're
in me,
good.
y'all. This is the I in me talking away, not paying attention to the time. All right, so here's what we're going to do. All right. In your chat, okay, I want you to write what is your top two colors that you have, but don't hit send yet, okay? Because we're going to do one long chat. I'm going to ask you three questions, and you're going to continue to put that in the chat. So once you have your style and your three questions answered, then we're going to share these in the chat just to kind of get an idea of how different styles communicate. So don't hit send, all right? But just put in there, what are your highest two things? So are you a D, I, S, or C? What are your two highest? And then the next thing I want you to do is type in, and I'm going to go through all three questions here. So just hold on for 1 second. The first question that I have is, what is your preferred method of communication? So again, don't hit send, just put it in there and then you can hit the return. I'm going to get you to answer all three. So what is your preferred method of communication when you're communicating with someone? Is it text message? Is it email? Do you like to hop on the phone? Is it in person? Do you like Zoom calls? Like, what is it that you prefer for communication? The second question that I have is what's really important to you in an interaction? All right. So let's just say that you're meeting with one of your retailers. Is it more important that everything is correct? Is it more important that you get to know them? Is it more important that, you kind of get those results? So what is really important to you in an interaction? And then the third question that I have is what is frustrating to you in an interaction? So I'll share with you for all the blues out there. What's frustrating to me in an interaction is when somebody's just going on and on about data and facts. I'm just like, whoa, okay, that doesn't align as much with my style. But that might be what somebody else loves. Okay, what's important to them is the data and the facts. So what is frustrating to you? Now, once you have your two top, and then you have your three questions answered, then you can hit send. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at all the different styles and the ways that we communicate. All right, so Sierra, since yours came up first, which I'm not surprised. So you are the D and the C. So you like texting and emailing. getting the information that you need and you don't like casual talk. I love it. Where's Sierra here? I have to, okay, perfect, Sierra. I can absolutely see from your answers the D and the C in that style. Hunter said, phone calls or in person. What's important is connecting with them and developing the rapport to get to business. And what they don't like is needless and boring storytellers. Okay, good, Hunter. I will try to minimize in person my needless, boring stories, but I do like stories. So hopefully I don't annoy you there. All right, so that's a DI, but the D is first, right? Which is very, let's get the result. Luis, I said that again. I said that right, Luis? Okay, perfect. You are an S followed by a C. So you prefer face-to-face communication. What's important is understanding, not surprised at all. And what you don't like is distracted or disinterested people. I love it. Bailey, you are an ID. So you like the phone, you like to connect, and you don't like rambling unpreparedness. I love it. Casey is an INS. Oh, and I love this. Where's Casey? I gotta find Casey here. Raise your hand here, Casey. There you are, Casey. Just the length of your answer is a very IS length. So you feel like I connect most in person. It's important to me that we have a connection, that we feel like we're on the same page, and you don't like the confrontation or the aggression that can be frustrating. So here's the thing, Casey, especially people who are the I's and the S's, they are talkers, right? So lots of times you'll see that in their answers. They'll give like long, we'll talk in class about getting your clients to talk more. If you have an I or an S, you could get them to talk all day long. If you have a D or a C, it could be hard to get them to talk. We have to use our skills. I love that. So Chris said an I and a C. You like telephones, results from an interaction, and when the conversation is low energy and I can't read the person. So Chris, where's Chris? Chris, is your camera on? You're my unicorn, Chris. You are the high yellow high C. You're my human mullet, Mr. Chris.
There you go. Sorry, my document was black and white, so I couldn't chime in on the colors. I was trying
Oh,
to keep
was
up.
it? Okay. So
Yeah,
you are the one who has an opposite style, Chris. So you are probably very like you've got the relationship side too, but you also do really like the results and making sure that things are, you wrote results from an interaction, right? To make sure you do that as well. I
yeah.
love it. Good. And then we have Cooper and Hofstad, yellow and green, in person, get to know the person, braggadocious people. Okay, Cooper, and you were the yellow green. Okay, so you're on that side. Alec had an SC, so you like phone calls, the results are important, and effortless interactions from the other side. I like it, Alec. Jenny said DC, I like to email or call. I want to build a relationship, but you don't like someone being distracted. Love it. Laura said IS in person, then phone calls, get to know their personality in person. And when it's only business and no personality, that will be frustrating. Cassie, D and I, phone, in person, getting to know the person's needs, not liking too much information and data. That actually aligns Cassie with that style as well. And Adev, did I say that right? Adev, am I pronouncing that correctly? Okay, so you are phone relationship, lack of tone. Perfect. Tate is an SC, phone call, get to know someone when someone's not engaged is frustrating. Blaine is an IC high as well, phone call and in person, better understanding of needs, constant topic, rambling or storytelling. And Aiden IS, calling over the phone, good communication, developing the relationship, non-collaborating or communicating, being dull. All right. So first of all, I just want to say thank you all for sharing that. The reason why I like doing this activity is because just when they do it, I know it took us a little bit of time to go through it, but you can see that lots of people have different things that they want to gain in an interaction. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are mindful of that. Okay. While there's certain things that we really like in a conversation and certain things that we find frustrating, all right, we have to think about who we're meeting with and what would they like out of the conversation, what's important to them. And when we start going through the rest of your assessment, I'm going to highlight some pages that will help us with that. But there's only one other thing that I want to talk about, okay? And that is, what if we meet the person and we're not able to tell, right? We can't tell. They just don't seem to, be giving us. So the first thing is if we don't know, we stay in the middle and then like I said, we come in neutral and we stay in the middle and then we follow their pace and focus. But if they are not giving us even that, because remember how I said some people are kind of neutral and it's a little bit harder to tell. From there, what I would do is I would just stay in that middle and slowly over time, as they get to know you, they might start to expand. So even if they're not giving you the pace and focus, you can't figure it out. We just kind of want to stay in that neutral zone until they start to open up. So that's a little bit there about ourselves. So if we know our own style, we can come in neutral, we can identify, follow the pace, follow the focus. Then that will help us to be able to align and adapt to other styles. But there's more to the assessment than just the graph that we took, so we're going to continue on. And the next thing that I want to talk about is the sales characteristics. This is the one where Laura had you go through and read through it and do the squiggly line and the straight line. So I want to take a pause here. All right. So when we look at the sales characteristics, the first thing I want to highlight is that this is just a general based on your style and your answers. What this has done is it's just selected general statements to kind of provide you a broad understanding of your particular sales style. So when we went through this activity, I just want to see a quick show of hands. How many of you found that there was a lot of things that you agreed with, where you were giving it the straight underline? You're like, yep, that sounds like me. This is accurate. I can see that. Do we have a lot of that? Okay. Were some of you wondering how we did the assessment? Like, did somebody follow you for 2 weeks and watch you? We did not. Okay. For the most part, there's always things typically in the assessment that we really do align with. We're like, yes, that is me. I do that. I like that. My second question is, how many of you had some squiggly lines in there too? Yeah. How many of you looked at that and you were like, I don't know if that's me? Okay, I will tell you for mine, I had two things when I did it. One was it said that I wasn't careful with my PowerPoint presentations, and I was like, no, I take extra care. And the second one is it said I was verbally aggressive, and it was like, what? I don't agree with that. I'm not verbally aggressive. But here's the thing, all right? When we do an assessment like this, there's no assessment out there that's 100% accurate, okay? It's not possible. But what I will tell you is there can be one of three reasons why you have something on the assessment that you don't agree with. So the first thing is that the assessment could be wrong. All right. So this one has about a 97% efficacy rate, but there could have been a statement or a question that you read and maybe you interpreted it in a slightly different way and it pulled something that doesn't really align with you. Now, this is the least likely reason why you would see something like that in an assessment. The second thing is sometimes, well, and this is good, we learn, okay? So I'm going to give you an example of the PowerPoint presentation. So for me, when it said, you don't take care, when I first started out in my sales career, I had a client that I'd worked really hard to get into. And when I showed up with my big, beautiful PowerPoint presentation, what I forgot to do is remove the competitor's logo off of it. It was horrifying. They never talked to me again after that. And I quickly learned you need to pay more attention to detail. So there's definitely things. So I want you to think about the stuff you didn't agree with in the assessment. Is there a potential that you have a tendency to be like that, but you have adjusted it because of results that you didn't like? Okay, so Sierra, I can see you shaking your head. I'll tell you a funny story too. Well, no, and this third one is sometimes we have blind spots. Okay, sometimes we really don't see ourselves. So remember how I told you I was so offended by verbally aggressive? And I was like, that is not me. I am not aggressive at all. Well, my husband and I just happened to be driving down the highway one day and we got into a conversation. And he looked at me and he's like, I think you're being very verbally aggressive. And I started laughing and I was like, okay, good point. I'm like, so when they say verbally aggressive, they just mean passionate. I'm just very passionate about things. So my point is that, yeah, I get a little feisty in my words when I'm upset, which was a little bit of a blind spot for me. And when he pointed it out, it just kind of made me laugh. So here's what I want you to do. All right. If you see something in there you don't like, I don't want you to just dismiss the whole assessment because, again, it could be one of those three reasons. But if it is something that you really don't agree with, right? You're like, this is not a previous experience. It's not something, this is not the way I think I am. Then what I want you to do is go to somebody who you trust a lot. So it can be a family member, it could be a coworker, it could be your boss, and just say, "Hey, I want you to take a look at this." And don't tell them anything about it. Just give them the section and say, "Does this sound like me?" And here's the crazy part. I give this assignment to people, they go do it, and they'll write me back and say, "You know what, Tara, they told me that was like me, and I had no idea." It is an opportunity for us to be able to maybe become aware of things that we aren't aware of. But if they say, "No, that's nothing like you," then don't even think about it again, right? So if we're not sure, maybe double check with someone. Always good to have that awareness. But if they say no, then I wouldn't, put too much stock into that. All right, so how do we feel about that? Good? Okay, perfect. So the next thing we're going to look at then is there's a few additional pages here. So the next one we have is what we call our value to the organization. And again, I'm just going to grab this, the value. Oh, and I didn't mention as well on page number 6, we have a wheel. It will just tell you based on your style where you fit, based on your blend. So, we have implementers, conductors, persuaders, promoters, relators, supporters, coordinators, and analyzers. It'll just kind of tell you where you fit in both your natural style and your adapted style. So your natural style will be the circle, and your adapted style will be the star. So it just kind of gives you a visual of where you sit, what your style is like. All right, so we move ahead past our sales characteristics. Our value to the organization is on page number 9. And all that is just simply what you bring to the table, literally the strengths that you bring from being who you are, right? Are you a good listener? Are you accurate and intuitive? Do you get things done quickly? It'll just have a list of all the things that you bring to the table. We then have, and these are probably my two most, I really love these pages, page number 10 and page number 11. All right. So these are our checklists for communicating. So when we look at good communication, all right, there are things that we really like in a communication. In fact, I want everybody to just take a quick moment. And on page number 10, I want you, if you look at the list, this is ways that you would like for people to communicate with you. So it'll give you a list of, maybe 9 to 11 different things. I want you to take a moment and look at that list. And out of it, what do you think would be like 2 or 3, maybe even 4 things that are really important when somebody is communicating with you? So just give it a quick check through the list. All right, so once you've checked off a few things there, here's what I will say. If you are having any communication issues with anyone, even internally or anything like that, at home in your personal life, a really good thing you can do is say, "Hey, when we're in a communication, these are the top 3 things that are really important to me," right? So that's great if we can share with people how we would like to be communicated with. But the second page, on page number 11, the ways not to communicate, I think that this is actually more important, okay? And the reason why is because when we are in a communication with someone, if they are communicating in a way that we don't like, right? Something that we really hate, our barriers can start to go up, even if we don't realize that it is happening. So, what you'll want to do is, I want you to take a quick look through page number 11, and I want you to pick out what are the top 3 or 4 things that annoy you the most when someone's communicating with you. So, what are the things that annoy you the most? All right. So this particular page, I think, is even more important than page number 10. And let me tell you why. All right. It would be a wonderful world if everybody just showed up and communicated exactly with the way we liked, but that doesn't often happen. But what we need to be aware of is the things that really can kind of start to put our own barriers up, the things that annoy us. And if, again, you're having communication issues, this might not work with the retailers as much just because, you don't know them, but if it's anyone personal or, within your peer group or at home, just simply telling them, hey, when we communicate, this is what I really like, but when you do this, it really bothers me. And getting them to share with you what do they really like and what really bothers them. Because here's the thing, there's definitely going to be crossovers, all right? So what you may like might be super annoying to someone else, and what someone else may want may be something that you don't like. So that actually brings us to page number 12, all right? So when we look at page number 12, this is going to be and hold on, let me just share this. This is going to be our selling tips, and I absolutely love this page, okay? The reason why is because when we're communicating with someone else or selling to someone else, we have a tendency to communicate or sell in our own style. So what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and look at your highest color. Okay. So if you were a yellow, I want you to read the yellow box. If you're blue, read the blue box, red and green, whatever is your highest. Take a few minutes to look at those. So we're going to use, oh, sorry, I'm talking too much. It's the yellow. I'm going to stop. All right, so has everybody had a chance to read through those? Okay, so let's use our yellow-blue example. So let's say that you have somebody that's a yellow. So this, when you're selling to someone who is a high yellow, they are someone who is, like I said, more enthusiastic, friendly, demonstrative. They like to, kind of chat and share ideas. So you will want to make sure you provide a warm, friendly environment. You don't deal with a lot of details unless they want them. They really like testimonials from people. That's important to them. They want to hear what other people think, but they don't like people who are cold, curt, tight-lipped, people who really control the conversation, or people who are driving on facts and figures. Okay. So if we look at this, we will tend to sell in our own style. So that is what I would like if someone was selling to me. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to look at whatever color is diagonal. So for this case, it would be blue. So for compliance, when we look at someone who's blue, they want you to stick to your prepare in advance, make sure your presentation is ready to go, stick to business, provide facts to support your presentation, be accurate, realistic, don't over exaggerate. And what they don't like is giddy, casual, informal, loud. They don't like wasting time with small talk. They don't like being disorganized and messy. What you will find is that there is a complete opposite between what you would like and what somebody else would like. So I'm going to take a moment, let you read through that. All right. So once we've done that, here's the reason why I like to highlight on page number 12. All right. When you're out in the field working with your retailers, okay, it's good to know how the different styles, what it is that they prefer in a communication. So by utilizing and being able to know and understand the styles, it will help you to be able to adjust your communication style. Once we go through a few more pages here, I'm actually going to get us to do an activity around that on how can we adjust our communication style. And I'm going to be putting you into small breakout groups to work on that. But before we do that, do we have any questions at all? Are we good with that? Okay, so the next important page I want to highlight is going to be on page number 14, and this is going to be perceptions, all right? So one of the things we know is that sometimes how we see ourselves is not necessarily how other people see us. So if we look at the perceptions page on number 14, I want you to read the words on the top one. So this is how we usually see ourselves. So have a look at that, read it. What do you think when you see that top one? Sound pretty good? Yeah, pretty accurate, right? Oh, I'm friendly, I'm this, I'm that, whatever it is. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to read how under moderate pressure, tension, or stress, this is how others may see you. What do you think of that middle one? Sierra, I love watching your facial expressions, I have to tell you. I can see you going, I'm not sure. One eyebrow went up. Okay. Would we all agree that maybe we don't want to be seen necessarily as that middle one? Would we agree with that? Okay. And then look at the bottom one. How would we feel if that's how people saw themselves or saw you? I know when I read mine, it said I was an over promoter and I was glib and I talked too much. It was horrible. I was like, oh my goodness, this is how people see me. Okay. So here's the reason why this page is so important. Okay. We see ourselves in one way, but that doesn't mean that's the way that other people are perceiving us. And the more stress we're under, the more pressure we're under, what will happen is our natural tendencies will start to become more exaggerated. All right. So, what I want you to understand in this is if you're feeling any type of a stressful situation and you feel like the person that you are working with may potentially be of a different style than you, I want you to be really aware so that you're not coming across in a way that you don't want to be perceived. And in fact, when we're under that pressure and stress, we want to actually that's when I say take a moment and kind of step back into that neutral zone because we can really start to kind of, like I said, over exaggerate our tendencies. When we're with a retailer, we want to kind of take a step back so that we're not being perceived in the wrong way. All right. Does anybody have glib? Did anybody get glib on theirs as one of their? Okay. I had to go look it up. I'm like, well, what does that even mean? Just so you know, did
That's
you?
funny you say that because I just had to Google it.
Did you? Yeah.
Never heard that one before.
I had not either, Bailey. And it just means that people may see you as not taking things too seriously. Like you almost kind of like are too casual about certain things. So, which I could see. You know, once I read it, I was like, okay. Did you get over promoter too? I got that, Bailey.
Oh yeah, I got self-promoting, overly optimistic. I mean, it wouldn't be a good test if I didn't take some offense to some of it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I can empathize with you there.
I get you. Verbally aggressive, my friend. Verbally aggressive. All right. The next thing from there. So I think that perceptions is a really good page because it does help us to kind of understand. So here is what we're going to do next. All right. We're going to move into an activity. And what we're going to do is we're going to put everything that we just talked about into practice on how can we adjust ourselves. So I want you to, with your assessment in hand, having your perceptions, your selling tips, like all the great stuff that we talked about, we are going to do a quick breakout activity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with you here. And if you guys actually want to take a screenshot of this, just so that you have it in the room with you when I put you in the breakout group, there's going to be two things that we're going to do. All right. So the first thing we're going to do, and I'm going to put you into small groups. We're just going to do groups of 3 so that you have the ability to kind of talk them through. And if you don't know each other, that's okay. Just introduce yourself when you get in there, but we're gonna go into small groups. So the first thing I want you to do is together as a group, I kind of want you to think, or you can talk about this. What is an internal role that you would interact with on a regular basis? So think about somebody, in your world, in your office, but someone internal, not a client or a retailer. Okay. And based on what you know about the style of that particular type of role, what characteristics or behavior characteristics do you think that they usually observe in that role? How do you think they prefer to communicate? What do you think is kind of the most common behavior style for this role? What can you do to improve communication with that role? So I'm going to give you a really quick example, then I'm going to bring this up and talk about part 2. If you are working with people, and again, we don't want to put people in boxes, but imagine that you have somebody who's in underwriting, right? Someone in underwriting has to be very detail oriented, right? They're going to take their time, they're going to make sure everything is accurate. So there are definitely certain styles that you can see that would align with different roles within the organization. So I want you to just kind of answer those questions on what are the common characteristics, what style do you think might kind of typically be in this role? And then the most important part of that is at the bottom when it said, what can you do? And again, I'm just going to bring this up to share. What could you do to improve communication with this particular role? And then I also want you to think about a retailer. Maybe think of a retailer that you've had that's been personally challenging to you. You haven't been able to create a connection. And based on what we talked about, what do you think would be their behavior style based on all the stuff we discussed? And what characteristics do they have that lead you to think that? So like either they're very direct or they're very, loud, whatever that is. And then how do you think they would prefer to communicate? Go back to that selling tips, right, that we had on our page. And what do you think you could do to improve that communication as well? So please feel free if you guys want to take a screenshot. I will also take one and we can put it in the rooms for you. Hold on, I'm just going to do a quick
I
step
took
here.
one, Tara, but I'm having trouble
Thanks.
dropping it in this chat. It's not.
It's not
going
letting
through.
you? Okay, hold
No, so
on.
see if you can, but I did try.
Okay, let me just see if I can do it here, Laura, just so I have it. Um, Save. Okay, good. Let me try here, Laura, and I should be able to put that in the chat for you all. So, screenshot. Yeah, it's letting me. So there we go. So I dropped it into the chat. So you guys have that there if you want to grab it so you can open it up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you about 10 minutes or so to go through the activity. And we won't debrief everyone when we come back, but I just want to be able to give everybody a chance to go through and do the activity. And then when we come back, we'll answer any questions that you have, and then we'll get ready to wrap up. So are we good with that plan? Okay, perfect. So all I was saying was I could tell from your facial expressions, I'm like, he can handle it if I pick on him during class a little bit.
That was totally fun.
All right. And I am so sorry, everyone. I was going through all the breakout groups, and in a typical high yellow, high eye style, I was just chatting with everybody. So, Cooper and Jenny and Sierra, how did it go in your group? You're the only group I didn't make it to. Was it good?
Yeah,
Good. Okay, Sierra, I love it. We've got a thumbs up. Perfect. So here's how I want to end the session today. Again, the purpose of this was I really wanted you to be able to know how to go through and read the assessment and to know where you stand. And this is so important because when we get in class, we are going to be threading this out throughout all of our skills that we're going to look at, the way we communicate, the way we interact, the way we build relationships with our retailers. This is all going to be very important. And I'm going to give you one final example, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. So I was doing a program, it's probably like about 6 months ago, where I had a gal, she was a young gal, she was a blue and a green, so very relationship oriented. And the topic we were talking about was building trust with customers, right? Building trust with clients. And she came up to me after class and she said to me, I've got this client and they are red and blue, like they're very results oriented. And she's like, she'd been working with them for quite a while. And she's like, I just need to find something personal so that we can create that personal connection to build the trust. And she's like, we just need to find that one thing that's going to be, it's going to bond us. And I remember kind of putting her aside and I said, okay, so I'm going to say this in the nicest way. I'm going to say what's important to you is to have a personal connection because you are relationship oriented. But I said, I guarantee if they are over here, you could go 20 years and they probably wouldn't care if they ever knew about your family or your pets or anything. And I said, I know it's a little hard to take when we're relationship oriented and it may happen naturally, but here's how you build trust with this style. I'm like, do you get things done? Do you get it done in a timely manner? Is it accurate? Are they happy with that? She's like, oh, always. I'm like, then that's trust. I'm like, that's what trust looks like to them. And this is what it looks like for you. So the reason why this is so important is because we really need to take what we learned today and we need to utilize that on how do we create and develop these relationships with our retailers? How do we build that trust? It might look very different. How do we maybe interact with them in a way that more aligns and resonates? Not saying we change who we are, right? But how do we align and make them feel more comfortable in the way we're communicating? All right. So with that being said, we have just over 15 minutes left. I would love to take any questions that anyone has. If there are no questions, I'm happy to share stories about my dog as well. I mean, if we need some, no, I'm just kidding. If there's no questions, I won't fill the time with stories about my dog. But just comments, thoughts, feedback. Does anybody have anything that they want to ask in the group? Any questions about the assessment or what something says or looks like? Good. Does everybody feel like they have a better understanding now compared to when we walked in, just going through it? Okay, here's the last thing I'm going to tell you then. All right. When we meet in class, which, like you said, Laura, is coming up so quickly, I can't even believe we're only like a few weeks away. I will be on site. If any of you have a question that you just want to ask me one-on-one, please bring your assessment with you. I'm more than happy. Like I'm usually there before class starts. I'm there, usually an hour early. I don't have to bolt right after class. So if there's something that you want that you just want to chat about, bring it with you. But also, I'm going to throw my email here. It's Tara. Sorry. gosh, I always mix up my two. It's tstewart@janik.com. If there is anything that you just want to email me as well, just about your assessment, please feel free, email it to me. I'm happy to respond. I have everybody's assessments, so I can give you, if there's any questions you have, you